What's going down, everybody? Welcome back to another CAD Pop Patreon Decktech. Let's hit it right now. All right, we are back. Welcome to another Commander at Populum Patreon submitted Decktech. This one submitted by Patreon supporter Chris Fitzgerald. Big thank you to all the Patreon supporters over at patreon.com/cadpopcast. This one's Chris's. He's our newest patron, so his deck got bumped to the top. Head on over to Patreon if you're not a supporter yet. Check out the reward tiers. The Decktech is one of them every second Friday. And don't forget, the Decktechs are all brought to you by FusionGamingOnline.com. They are your source for all of your gaming needs and all of your deck tech needs. You can head over there, pick up the cards in the deck if this interests you or if you find some hidden piece of tech somewhere. If you do, just leave a note to the vendor right at checkout that Ryan from Commander at Populum sent you. Helps the show out a ton. Lets Fusion know that their partnership with me is a good one. Now, today we're doing a Slimefoot the Stowaway deck. And this is a 2/3 fungus for green, black, 1. Whenever a sapperling you control dies, Slimefoot the Stowaway deals 1 damage to each opponent, each one, and you gain 1 life. And you can pay 4 to create a 1/1 green sapperling creature token. So I think for the most part, lots of people do like aristocrat Slimefoot decks. Slimefoot is sort of an aristocrat. If you have a sapperling die, everybody loses and we gain, right? But people put the blood artists, the Zulaport cutthroats, and ways just to make tokens and creatures and big mana or infinite mana or token doublers to get more out of Slimefoot's aristocrat ability out of the command zone. And we're going to do a little bit of that today. But that's not all we're going to do, and we've got some cool nostalgia and some cool stories kind of built into this deck. And I say nostalgia, remember, the deck techs are for 3 groups of people or some combination thereof, and Chris actually gave me a note right in the email right up for the deck. This deck is for nostalgia factor and going outside of your comfort zone. So, new players, that's the first group that we want to cater to here. Teaching the fundamentals, teaching deck building basics, teaching you how to build maybe your first or second deck. The second group of people, those looking to refine an edge, go outside their comfort zone, maybe go all in on a strategy that they haven't yet. And that is part of who this deck tech is for. Finally, the nostalgia players, the longtime guys. And Chris started playing in 1995, I believe, and has been playing all the way through and actually got a bunch of these cards for a wedding gift. I talked about that a little bit on episode 89 last week of Commander ad Populum proper. Didn't give any of today's info away, but I thought that I should mention that there because it fits. So that's who the deck tech's for. We know the commander. Let's get into some of the business of the deck. We're going to get the card draw. We're going to get some of the ramp and kind of just the business staples out of the way. And then we're going to go into some of the actual tech and cool cards that are included. So I guess for ramp, we've got a soul ring, a Mind Stone, those are our mana rocks. We've got a Rampant Growth, Nature's Lore, Farseek, and a Cryptolith Rite. Those are our 2-drop versions of mana production. Cryptolith Rite making all of our creatures tap for a mana of any color. That's important because we're going to have a lot of sapperlings, and if we can make a bunch of them and then tap them for mana, they're going to feed Slimefoot's ability to pay 4 to make a sapperling. So good include there. We've got a Growing Rites of Itlamok. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You can reveal a creature, put it into your hand. At the beginning of your end step, if you control 4 or more creatures, which we probably will, we transform it into a land that taps for a green for the number of creatures that we have on the battlefield. Great. We've got a Cultivate. That's the other one at 3-drop, or the 3-drop slot. Land into play, land into hand. And then we've got an Arbor Elf, Birds of Paradise, and a Llanowar Elf. So 12 ramp spells in total. I think that's adequate. They're all in between 1 and 3 mana. If you get any of the 1-drop ones on turn 1, you're going to be able to cast your commander on turn 2, which is important. And that whole section of the deck is right around $60. So we're gonna talk about the budget of this deck a little bit because there's some places where we can make a whole swath of cuts. But on to card draw. We've got 6 cards in this category for a total of $10. Harmonize, Night's Whisper, Read the Bones, Shamanic Revelation, Sign in Blood, and of course, Skull Clamp in a Sapperling deck where when we clamp them, draw 2, everybody loses a life, we gain a life. Very important card. all at 4 mana or less, except for Shamanic Revelation, which I think is a good include here because we draw a card for each creature we control. In a token deck, that's awesome. A little bit more business, we've got some removal and protection. We've got Assassin's Trophy at 2 mana that destroys a permanent an opponent controls, then they get a basic land. We've got a Beast Within, destroys anything, and then they get a 3/3. Dictate of Erebos, which is probably a very important control card, and Chris says in his write-up that he likes to make controlling style decks, but with this one, he didn't want to include blue. He didn't really want to have a combo backup finish because he wants to kind of tailor back or reduce the power of his decks to encourage his opponents or his play group to do the same. They all play fairly powerful, fairly fast decks. He wants a deck like this to be powerful and to have a few different ways that it can win, but to not be too crazy. Though Dictate of Erebos, still very powerful card. Flash for black 3. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. So whenever we do the Slimefoot sacrifice, draw a card thing, we can make our opponents all sacrifice creatures. Finally, we've got Nature's Claim in the removal section. Destroy target artifact. Its controller gains 4 life. Or enchantment, I should say. In the protection section, Heroic Intervention gives our stuff hexproof and indestructible. And then we've got a Veil of Summer. Very good card here. Draw a card if an opponent has cast a blue or black spell this turn. Spells you control can't be countered this turn. Also good. You and permanents you control gain hexproof from blue and from black this turn. Holy smokes, this card does it all for the cost of green. Very powerful. Very powerful card there. A couple utility things just to kind of catch all things. We've got a Dark Petition. This lets us search our library for a card, then put it into our hand. If we've got 2 or more instant and sorcery cards in our graveyard, we can add black to our mana pool. So it reduces the cost of this card to essentially just 2 mana instead of 5. Speaking of 2 mana tutors, we've got Demonic Tutor. We've got a Path of Discovery. Whenever a creature you control enters the battlefield, it explores. And what that means, this is an enchantment for 4. What it means is reveal the top card of your library, put that card into your hand if it's a land, otherwise put a +1 counter on that creature, then put that card back on top or into your graveyard. And we've got a little bit of a recursion package, so we might want it in our graveyard, but it kind of lets us scry to the top or to the graveyard or get a +1 counter. So Path of Discovery is good because whenever a creature enters the battlefield, we can do that. We're going to get lots of tokens. We can fill up the graveyard. We can get lots of +1 counters on something. Okay, Wretched Confluence is our next one. This is part of a cycle. This is the black one. Instant for black 3. Choose 3, and you can choose them more than once. Target player draws a card and loses 1 life. Great. Or 2 or 3. Target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn, or -6 or -4. Or return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. And you can do that again 2 or 3 times. So lots of utility, lots of just general value, lots of kind of unexpectedness. Finally, we've got a Golgari Charm. Green-black instant, choose 1. All creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn. Destroy target enchantment or regenerate each creature you control. Very important. And Chris made a note in his write-up to say all creatures get -1/-1 on Golgari Charm. It's probably least used mode is actually a win con in this deck because if we have a ton of Saprolings that are all 1/1s and we kill them all by giving them all -1/-1, Slimefoot can actually just kill people or gain us a ton of life. So I think that's a cool trick. It adds essentially a very underutilized mode to that card, and I love to see that kind of thing, that kind of creation, the creativity, the wherewithal to say, hey, this mode is actually really good in this deck. Oh yeah, and upside is there's 2 other modes that are good in like every deck. So excellent include there. I love to see that kind of stuff. Now, that recursion package we talked about ended up being one of the most expensive categories in the deck. 4 cards, almost $210, and that's because we're including personal favorite of mine, Yawgmoth's Will, at $200 just right there. It lets you cast or play stuff out of your graveyard until end of turn. If it goes to your graveyard this turn, it gets exiled instead for 3 mana. So essentially you can cast stuff, play lands, do whatever you want out of your graveyard. We've got a Seasons Past that returns any number of cards with different converted mana costs from our graveyard to our hand. And then we shuffle it or put it onto the bottom of our owner's library. So again, we can fill up our graveyard with Path of Discovery, for example, and then just get a selection of those cards back at the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever mana cost. We've got a Fungal Rebirth. Return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. If a creature died this turn, create 2 1/1 green Saprolings. So this is the first time we see Saprolings in the deck other than Slimefoot in our Saproling token deck. I promise you we'll get there. And then finally, we've got an Eternal Witness. You just get something back on a 2/1 body. So that's kind of the skeleton of the deck. That's what makes the deck kind of like any other high-functioning EDH deck. You've got your card draw, your ramp, your protection, your removal, recursion, all of the things that you need to keep the machine well-oiled and all the gears and things ticking and moving. Now, let's find out what we're going to do here. Let's find out how we're going to sap, if you will. 17 cards that do this, and these 17 cards only cost $37, so I don't think we're going to cut any of them. We've got a Life and Limb. All forests and all saprolings are now 1/1 green saproling creatures and forests, in addition to their other types. So essentially, all of your forests become Dryad Arbors. Interesting. Creature lands. Sure, we can kill them all with the Golgari Charm and Slimefoot out and get an extra, 8, 10, 12 life loss out of everybody just by dropping a Life and Limb. Could be a good finishing play. Could be a good way with one of our win cons. You'll find out in a second. We've got a Mycoloth. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 saproling for each +1 counter on Mycoloth. It's got Devour 2, so it enters the battlefield, you sacrifice any number of creatures, and it gets 2 +1/+1 counters for each card you sacrificed. If you sacrifice 10, well, you're going to put 20 +1 counters on it. It's going to be a 24/24. It's going to give you 20 counters every upkeep, or 20 saproling tokens every upkeep. Very powerful card, very high top end, medium floor type card, because it's only 5 mana, sacrifice a few things, it's going to be way above rate, but it is a lightning rod, so you just got to be careful. We've got a Necrogenesis. You exile target creature card from a graveyard to get a saproling at the cost of 2 mana. It's an enchantment. That's just a good value one. Nomada Grove Guardian. I mentioned this one last week in the story I told about Chris's email where he received this card and a bunch like it from this era from his best man as a wedding gift. Years later, like years later, his friend gets back into Magic and he gives him a bunch of the cards back. The nostalgia factor, the camaraderie, it's all there. It's a great story. You should go listen to it if you haven't. Love it. And I love this card. This is a 4/5 for green 4. You pay green 2, put a green saproling creature token into play. Great. You sacrifice a saproling. All other saprolings get +1/+1 until end of turn. So this is a finisher for 6 mana. And let's say you've got a bunch of saprolings, like a bunch. Maybe you just made a bunch that have summoning sickness. This card kind of acts like Craterhoof Behemoth, where let's say I just played a doubler or just got something that gave me like 10 saprolings. Then I drop Nomada Grove Guardian. And if it was a doubler like Saproling Symbiosis, it's in here, we'll talk about it in a second. Saproling Symbiosis doubles our saprolings. Nomada, sacrifice all the ones that have summoning sickness. Let's say it's 10 and I have 10 remaining. That's going to give all my saprolings +10/+10. And I can just attack in for 100. This card is insanely powerful in saproling decks. I don't know why it's $4. The foils, ridiculous. But the Planeshift regular one, $4. Awesome. I'll just read Saproling Symbiosis now. It's actually from a cycle, the same cycle as one of my favorite cards, Twilight's Call. Same cycle as Route. Same cycle as Breaking Wave. And what was the red one? I don't know what the red one was. Doesn't matter. Symbiosis is green 3. Put a 1/1 green saproling creature token onto the battlefield for each creature you control. So it doubles your tokens in the form of saprolings. You can pay 2 when you play it to cast it at instant speed instead. So it's effectively an instant speed, double my things to block type card too. You can use it offensively or defensively. All right. Saproling Burst. This one's got fading. So if you want to learn how fading works, go back a couple weeks ago when we talked about, I want to say Future Sight, where we talked about the difference between fading and vanishing. This one's got fading 7. Remove a fade counter from Saproling Burst. Put a green saproling creature token onto the battlefield with this creature's power and toughness are each equal to the number of fade counters remaining. And then when Saproling Burst leaves play, destroy all tokens that were put into play with Saproling Burst. But essentially, if it's got Fading 7 and you remove one, you can put 1/6/6 into play. You remove another one, now you've got 2 5/5s, then 3 4/4s, then 4 3/3s, etc. Down to, well, you remove the last one and you've got 7 0/0s. Anyways, Saproling Migration. This is a sorcery for green 1. You can kick it for 4. You create 2 1/1s. If it was kicked, you create 4 instead. And it's interesting when I think about the deck and when we see some of the includes in the land section and I read Chris's write-up about it, Saproling Migration and Sprout Swarm, nobody expects you to drop a Bayou turn 1 followed up by a Sprout, which is just a sorcery, an instant, create a Saproling for just green, right? And that's kind of what Saproling Migration is. And Scatter the Seeds is like that with Convoke. Spore Swarm is like that. You get 3 things. Yavimaya Safford. It's not a shepherd, it's a sappard. I forgot that card even existed. Tuckatung Thalid, when it dies, it creates a Saproling. These cards are just terrible. And I love that you could cast them on the back of a turn 1 bio. You could go like bio, Soul Ring, go. Next turn, instead, like just trolley. Oh yeah, your deck, you're playing dual lands and you said it wasn't a powerful deck. And then you drop like a Tuckatung Thalid and they're like, what in the actual? Oh, I love it. I love it. Love it. Anyways, back onto the real cards. Spontaneous Generation. You get a green Saproling for each card in your hand when you cast it. I will read Sprout Swarm, even if it does fall into the previous category of like, oh, these are bad. But this one's actually good. It's an instant for green 1. It's got Convoke, so you can tap creatures to pay the cost of the spell. And it's got Buyback 3. And Buyback, you can actually pay that by convoking. So eventually you can just tap your Saprolings to pay for the entire spell and then put it back in your hand. So this is a consistent source of Saproling kind of card advantage. Very cool. Next very powerful one, Tender Shoot Dryad. Green 4 for a 2/2. It's got Ascend. So if you have 10 or more permanents, you get the City's Blessing. And at the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 green Saproling. Saprolings you control get +2/+2 as long as you control the City's Blessing. So cool. That it buffs them. If you've got 10 or more permanents and you drop this and you just crash in and probably win. Same can be true for Thelonite Hermit. Thelonite Hermit, Saproling creatures get +1. It's got Morph. When you turn it face up, you get 4 Saprolings. I don't know if you do that very often because you got them like 3 to face down at 5 to turn it face up. I'll just cast it for 4 and pump my team. It's probably fine. That's how we make Saprolings. We've also got a contingent of doubling type cards. One of which is kind of absent, I'll talk about in a second. This category, 3 cards, $76. Of course, because it's got doubling season in it. $45. Just reprinted, $45 again. Anyways, essentially, if you get tokens or counters on anything, they're doubled. Your Mycoloth, your Saprolings, whatever it is, you're getting 2 of that effect. So, of course, powerful, probably needs to be in here. I'm not going to say cut it, even if it's one of the most expensive cards in the deck. Next one, Parallel Lives. Kind of the same thing. At 4 mana, if you get a token, you get 2 tokens instead. So 1 Saproling actually equals 2. Finally, Second Harvest. This is the cheapest at $1. For each token you control, you get another of that token. And there's another card called Parallel Evolution, does the same thing except for more mana, but it's got flashback. So if you have a token, you can double it, and then it's got flashback for like green 6 or something, so you can double it again. It actually quadruples your tokens. With a doubling season or Parallel Lives, it would actually octuple your tokens. Maybe by that point it's overkill, you don't need it, particularly because it costs the most mana, but powerful card. It exists. I think it's from Torment. I think that's why it's underplayed. People just don't know that it exists. And I played that in my 60-4 Saproling deck way back in the day. Like the same time Chris Fitzgerald and his buddy were playing Saproling decks, I was playing mine too. So the nostalgia factor for me here is like through the roof. I love this deck as soon as it came in. I knew I was going to love it. And this is probably the exact kind of thing that I would like to build. Talk about having things in my good box, my commander box from CAD-Pop 89 last week, where I talked about kind of how I build decks. I've got most of these things because I love playing these weird, janky, sapling cards. I just love them. They're awesome. So we're getting through the deck here. We've got a couple more categories. We're making saplings like crazy. If not with our commander, with those 17 cards I just went through, and then the 3 doublers, of course, not to mention the Yawgmoth's Will, so we can do a bunch of them again. Slimefoot says, whenever a sapling dies, it deals 1 damage to each opponent, and we gain a life. So we need some ways to facilitate that. We've got Ashnod's Altar, Phyrexian Altar, those just let us sacrifice and get mana. Both at the 3-drop slot, great. We've got a Viscera Seer, another classic sack outlet. We sack a creature to scry 1. And this is a 1/1 vampire for black. Powerful card, albeit just like kind of not a whole ton to it, which is kind of cool. I kind of like it, and lots of people do. It's almost a $3 common. And finally, we've got a Woe Strider. This is a new one from Theros Beyond Death, a horror for black 3/2. When it enters the battlefield, create a 0/1 white goat creature token. Okay. Sacrifice another creature. Scry 1. So just like Viscera Seer. And you can escape this one. Black 3. Exile 4 cards from your graveyard. And when it escapes with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So great for escaping with Doubling Season. It gives you a body to sacrifice if you need some of the mana back. So really it only costs 2 if you have like a Phyrexian Altar, and it costs 1 if you have an Ashnod's Altar, which is great. And it's going to work fairly well with Path of Discoveries because the path is going to give you cards to escape it with. So that's our sacrifice plan. I think for the most part, we're going to try and make saplings in the highest numbers that we can. That's what we're going to prioritize. If they die incidentally, Slimefoot's just going to ping you, and you're going to maybe eliminate players that way, especially if you've got like a spontaneous generation to double the amount of saplings or double with a Doubling Season. If we're not on that plan, I think this might be plan 1A or plan A1. I'm not sure, because this is going to do the same thing except maybe faster. We've got a 5-card Infect package with Glistening Oil, Grafted Exoskeleton, Phyresis, Tainted Strike, and Triumph of the Hordes. Triumph, of course, being the most powerful. All creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain trample until end of turn. So if we can make all our saplings from 1/1 to 2/2, or from 2/2 to 3/3, if we've got like the Tender Shoot Dryad or what have you, we're probably going to win. But if we've got something like Nomada Grove Guardian and they've declared blockers and we sacrifice everything that's blocked to pump one thing up with Nomada's sacrifice ability, and then we Tainted Strike it, well, we're probably going to win the game. The same is kind of true for Glistening Oil, Grafted Exoskeleton, and Phyresis, but we've got to kind of have those on because they're sorceries or equipments. We've got to have those on before blockers. So maybe we would lean into our removal package a little bit more. Attack the player that's got 1 or 2 blockers, we remove both of them, and then we get in with our Infector, and then we pump it somehow. And I just thought of this. The commander has a damage ability. So if you enchant Slimefoot with Phyresis or Glistening Oil or what have you, you give Slimefoot Infect, then you dump a bunch of saplings into the yard. That's how you do it. Slimefoot's going to infect each opponent times 10 or times however many saplings you sacrifice, and that's how you win the game. So that's kind of the secondary plan A, I guess. It's just going to speed up what we're already doing. The real plan B, and I think it's always important to have a plan B, whether that be some way just to pound in or some combo backup to make sure that you can seal a game. And Chris talks about this in an email. He doesn't want to include infinite combos, but if you're spending 8, you could be that guy with Craterhoof Behemoth. 5/5 for green 5, haste. When it enters the battlefield, all of your creatures get +X and trample until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control, and we're going to have lots of them. So like I said, you're already playing Nomada Grove Guardian. It kind of acts like Craterhoof Behemoth, and I will say this 1-card Plan B category of Craterhoof is $40. In Chris's email that he sent, he said he doesn't want to play Vertaloth the Ancient, one of my personal favorite cards of all time from Invasion. He doesn't want to play it because it's too much mana. Essentially, it's a 4/6 tree folk. Other sapling, other tree folk you control get +1/+1. It's got Kicker of X. When it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, you get X 1/1 green sapling creature tokens. Now, that costs 6 mana. You can pay X equals 2. That's an 8 total converted mana cost. Same as Craterhoof, and you're going to give all your team of saplings +1/+1. I would argue if you're sapping hard enough, that's gonna be enough. If you can double the power of your creatures, it's probably gonna be enough. You might not need a $40 Crater Hoof. You could get away with the 36-cent Vertaloth the Ancient, which is on theme with Saproling, it's on theme with nostalgia, it's on theme from what you and your buddy might have gotten or given to each other as gifts. I think that that's a better include, but again, I am biased because I just love that card. It's from my favorite set of all time. So I guess on that is the whole deck outside of the lands, and we've been paying attention to how much different categories cost, and I want to spend a couple minutes on it. Because Crater Hoof, $40. The land section for this deck, $660. The doublers section, $75. The recursion section, $210, right? Like Yawgmoth's Will, does it need to be in there? Maybe it could be like a regrowth or that modal double-faced regrowth that we just got so it can double up as a land, right? Doubling Season you probably want to keep in there. Crater Hoof, I said cut it, play Vertaloth. But we've got in here a Bayou, a Bloodstained Mire, a Polluted Delta, a Wooded Foothills, and a Yavimaya Hollow, which regenerates a creature. It's from Urza's Legacy, or Destiny, sorry, at $60. This whole land section is $660. We could probably cut that land section down based on this being a two-color deck to probably less than like $100. Like the Bayou, the couple fetch lands, the Yavimaya Hollow, and we've cut half of the price of this $1,300 deck. We've almost cut half of the price off. For sure, we're below half if we cut the Yawgmoth's Will off. For sure, we would be half price. And I think it's important just to mention that because the Crater Hoofs, the Yawgmoths, the dual lands, the fetch lands, they aren't necessarily required to have this same deck, maybe the same 90 cards with maybe basics, Vertaloth, regrowth. We would still have the same deck, but it wouldn't be $1,300. And a lot of these things are Ashnod's Altars, Harmonizes, Night's Whispers, Dictative Ereboses, things that you can kind of pick up, or things that were very cheap and in Commander Precons. So this deck is obtainable, provided you make a couple cuts. And I'm going to assume that if you are the new player or the player going outside your comfort zone like this deck is kind of centered for, you don't have a Bayou. And you might not have the 3 or 4 fetch lands that are in here. Don't run them. Don't need them. And I think it's important to say that because you can have, like I said, 90% of the same deck, certainly 100% of the same experience without them. And I know that Yawgmoth's Will is an effect that's hard to replicate, but if we're not doing anything crazy degenerate, maybe just run a regrowth and you can get the one thing back that you need, maybe that spontaneous generation to double and then double again your Saprolings, and you're going to achieve kind of the same thing, and you crash in and win anyways because you just made like 50 more Saprolings or what have you. So again, cut the price of the deck in half with those few cards and have yourself a good time. Chris, huge thank you for sending the deck in. It appealed to me personally on a nostalgic level. I love the story so much that I kind of did an episode about it last week and this week, how you guys gave cards to each other and we're all connected and we're one big community. I love it. So big thanks to sending it in. Big thank you to all of the Patreon supporters over at patreon.com/CADPopcast. You guys make it all go around. I appreciate the support. If you'd like to support the show, head on over. Check out the reward tiers. There's lots of great benefits. The Discord, Altars, Altar of the Day, the Decktechs. But if Patreon's not right for you and you still want to support the show, let me know how it sounds. Let me know how this Decktech appealed to you at CADPopcast on Twitter. Find me on Facebook. Give me a friend request. You can find me on the Commander at Populum Facebook page. Or, of course, you can head on over to FusionGamingOnline.com. They are the official sponsors of the Decktechs. If you pick up any cards from this deck today, which you could, just let them know that Ryan from Commander at Populum sent you in the little notes at checkout. I'd greatly appreciate that because that support does help the show quite a bit. I hope you liked the deck. I hope it spoke to you in some way, taught you something, some little interaction, minutia, or some piece of history, Vertaloth and Nemata, and just kind of cards from that era, how they can kind of act instead of something like Crater Hoof, which, again, we don't need to be spending $40 on cards if we have an on-theme version of the card that's way cooler from 20 years ago for like 30 cents. So I'd super appreciate if people kind of just took the time to find those little things and make special decks like this. So with that, everybody, I will see you next Wednesday.